this class is the introduction to Localscapes. So this is a fairly new landscaping program that focuses on landscaping dependent on where you live. So, I mean, for example, like landscaping your yard in northern Utah is going to be different than landscaping in southern Utah, right? I mean, you can take the steps that we're going to be learning from this class and apply them to both places, but the landscape itself is going to have different plant material and things, but this is such a good program that makes landscaping a little bit easier to understand. Let's see. My presentation is not moving forward. There we go. Okay, so each of these pictures, we're kind of going through some scenarios in your landscape. And this is kind of the first step, is thinking about how you're wanting to spend your time in your landscape. Is it this kind of a look where you're having fun and being around your family? I mean, of course, these pictures are like stock photos, so it's not exactly like it's how it's going to be. But is this kind of how you're wanting to spend your time out in your landscape? Or is this what you're doing every time you're outside in your landscape, maintaining it and making it beautiful, but maybe at the end of it, you're so tired that you're laying splayed out on the ground, right? And if this is you, then maybe it's time to start rethinking your landscape. So from this class, here's some things that you're going to be learning. You're going to be learning the 5 steps of the Localscape process, and that's created especially for Utah. Some common design areas that cause our landscapes to fail, and then how the layout of the landscape directly affects maintenance, irrigation efficiency, and the function. And so Localscapes, it almost gives you like a new lens to look through your landscape to be able to see changes that are needed more clearly. And then some things that you're not going to be learning is how to create a specific landscape design, specific plants to grow in your yard, how to modify your personal irrigation system, and details to create a Localscape. So, I mean, all of these things are things that you're going to be learning through the Localscapes program if you continue to take other courses. For example, like we have a Localscapes design class that we're going to be teaching. And so that's something that you can learn from that class, how to create a design. Specific plants, we're going to be actually teaching like a perennials class and some other, let's see, we're doing like an herbs class and things. So those are going to be talking more about specific plants that you can be putting in your yard. There's also a Localscapes irrigation class as well. And then there's a Localscapes university class that goes a little bit more into depth with other things also. So that's what we're not going to be learning at in this specific class, but you can be learning those in classes in the future. So the first thing is the fact that Utah is a pretty unique state, just because we have these really hot summers that are really hot and dry, but then we have winters that are really wet. Well, I guess this winter hasn't been exactly super wet, but it still is really cold and we get snow. So we have these two really polar opposite climate points, right, in Utah. And so it kind of makes landscaping a little bit difficult. And so Utah pretty much needs its own style, and one that's designed to work for our specific climate and that works throughout various regions across the state. And irrigation systems shouldn't be designed, or like, okay, let me phrase that differently. Landscapes should be designed to fit the irrigation rather than you trying to irrigate a landscape that needs a lot more irrigation than you have. if that makes sense. And the Localscape design principles are developed in a way to be able to help you create that landscape, that you're landscaping in a way that fits the irrigation that we have here in Utah, as opposed to other landscape design principles that were created centuries ago in a completely different climate than we have in Utah. So you can see in these two different examples, so we have an English style garden here on the left, I think it'd be left for you, and then a Utah Localscape on the right. And I mean, they're different. They're both really beautiful, but the English style garden, they have a lot of plants that need a lot of water and a lot of maintenance and things. And on the Utah Localscape sides, we're now creating a landscape that's not going to be using as much water, but is still really beautiful. And I mean, it's a simple shift, but it benefits your Utah landscape so much because you're not having to try to compensate with extra irrigation that frankly Utah doesn't really have, right? And it looks super duper good. And I mean, the Localscape program, it does a few things for you. It increases your curb appeal. It's something that's fairly easy to understand. It reduces your maintenance actually on your yard. Some people really think that creating this kind of a landscape is going to increase your maintenance, but if you're doing it right, then it actually can really decrease your maintenance. And it also improves the function of your yard as well. So as far as it being easy to understand, this is something that homeowners do come to us often, is just the fact that trying to understand how to create a new landscape can be something that's difficult to understand. It can be actually pretty complex, right? But the nice thing about this Localscapes program is that it's created 5 simple steps that are pretty easy to understand and to be able to go through and make it a process that a homeowner can easily do. And it's nice too, because since you have those steps, you can be doing things one at a time and kind of slowly, or you can do them all at once, whatever kind of fits with you and how you're feeling about it. It also increases curb appeal. So this yard was a landscape that a lady, she went through the Localscapes program, and I'm pretty sure they did everything themselves. And it went from a yard that, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a pretty like typical yard of Utah, right? And it went from this simple kind of, I don't know, I kind of think it's boring, but other people might like it. But it went from this to a Localscape yard that I think increases that curb appeal a lot. And it's beautiful. And there's so much variation in color. And it looks so good to me. This is the second year after it's been put in. So there's even some good growth on those perennials, and the trees are looking awesome, and things, it looks like things established really well. So this like really increased her curb appeal. And it's something, I mean, we have a video later that she talks about actually how much she really enjoys her landscape. And then it reduces the maintenance. So, I mean, most people don't think that putting in landscape plants reduces your maintenance, because they're like, all the weeds are gonna be taking over, and then I'll have to spray, and I'll have to put down new mulch, new weed barrier fabric, and on all these things. But we'll kind of show you step by step how that's actually not true. And it's nice because it reduces maintenance by creating areas that are specific to certain things. So, I mean, your lawn areas, for example, your kind of typical Utah landscape, the lawn areas are pretty much around the entire house, right? And the Localscape program helps you in creating an area, like a simple area where you can put that lawn. And so now you're just mowing that area. You're only edging that area, and the other areas are now have their own function, so that it's not all lawns. You're just mowing all day long. And then at the end of the day, you're just tired and you don't want to be outside anymore, right? But now we have the smaller area to maintain. And And also putting drip irrigation in your beds, something that actually reduces maintenance a lot, because you're putting water directly towards those plants. You're not giving water to the whole area where the weeds can grow up, right? So it's just these little simple things that you change in your landscape, and it does a big difference. And then it also simplifies your irrigation. So creating areas that are a little more structured and not as kind of wonky areas, or you have random plant beds in the middle of your yard, that can make your irrigation system pretty complex and makes irrigating actually kind of difficult to be able to have full coverage and make things all green. But simplifying your areas and having better focuses on like your lawn areas and your plant beds is going to simplify the irrigation, because you're going to have an irrigation system for your lawn and an irrigation system for your plant beds, instead of trying to put it all together and watering everything and also trying to make everything look really good. Now you have specific irrigation for specific things. And then it also improves the function of your yard. So now you have certain areas that are going to be designated for certain things. So like your lawn area is going to be here, your pathways are going to be here, your entertainment area is going to be over there, right? So you're going to have these specific areas for specific things, improving the function of your landscape instead of having it all just be lawn. So we're going to start getting into the steps. This is the Localscapes house. It's a 3D rendition that they've made to kind of show you all the different parts of the landscaping or the localscaping 5-step process. And so this landscape has all of those steps within it, and we're going to be going through each of those steps separately. So step 1 is a central open space. So in our 3D render here, the central open space is that green area there, right? And this can be your grass. It can also not be grass. I mean, people have done really nice central open shapes that are gravel. It's just an area to be able to have your eyes rest from everything else, because all around you're going to be having plant beds in other places, and maybe like a gazebo in another place. So it's a place for your eyes to kind of rest on. That's your central open space. It kind of cleans up the clutter, right? And organizes it. That's a nice word to be able to help, is that it organizes your landscape. So we can see in a real life example here. So we have this nice landscape all around your central open space, right? If you think about the fact that that central open shape was gone, and if it was filled with plants, it would look pretty messy, right? But with that, you have a place for the eyes to rest. And now you're seeing, okay, like there's this really actually beautiful landscape all around and this nice area in between. And then the lack of an open shape. So this example is all lawn. This is pretty typical of Utah landscapes, right? A complete all lawn. There's no variation. There's nothing for the eye to like catch because it's all flat. So it just kind of makes it I mean, this is pretty extreme, like on the other side with nothing else to look at except for grass. But if you think about the maintenance for this area, you're having to mow that every week. You're needing to edge it to make sure that it's not growing onto the street and growing onto your sidewalk and onto your driveway and things. And there's nothing really that you can do with this landscape. All you can really do is maintain it, right? So that's like all turf. So that's completely on the one side. But then this one, the lack of an open shape, of a central open shape, there's none at all. So this landscape looks just really disorganized and messy, kind of. I mean, they have beautiful plants in there. You can see the different plants that are really pretty. But since there's no place for the eye to rest, it kind of just looks disorganized and messy. And I mean, we've talked about that increase of curb appeal, right? I mean, this one looks not very organized and things, like it's going to look messy, not really an increase in curb appeal. Whereas this one, you have that central open shape. It's pretty open to the door. You're seeing all these pretty plants and you're like, wow, that looks so nice. And then you see the pretty house and it just like shapes the house really well and it looks awesome, right? So like that central open shape really increases that curb appeal. And then reducing maintenance, you're putting that central open shape in an area instead of having it around the entire yard. You now have just this little area that you're going to be maintaining more frequently. The other areas you're maybe going to be weeding once a week or just like a little bit at a time, right? Instead of having to go out there once a week for 3 hours and mow your entire yard, maybe more, because then you're gonna have to go and edge it and everything too, and then clean up the grass clippings and things. But now you just have this little area. So having that central open shape can reduce your maintenance, simplifies your irrigation because you have your irrigation just in that area. And so it makes irrigating really easy and you're not having to go around random plant beds and random things sticking up out of your yard. And then it improves the function, right? I mean, your typical yard, that area is the area that is being used anyways. And all those other areas behind like your little kidney bean thing, like nobody really uses that lawn. No one uses lawn in the park strip. And so all it's doing is being watered and you're having to mow it. Whereas in the Utah Localscape there on the right, all of that lawn area is usable. It's an area that is now centralized and where people can actually use it because there's nothing blocking their usage. And it's not in random places that they're not gonna go. So here's another one, typical yard on the left with the kidney bean shape. You can kind of see how it just kind of is random in the middle of the yard and then also kind of blocks the view of the house. So it's not really doing anything, just being in the middle there. Whereas there on the right, we have that central open shape that leaves the eye something to rest on with the landscape kind of all around. And then you have this really nice house, right? Again, I talked about alternative materials before. Gravel, you can do kind of a ground cover type of thing. You can do pavers or brick or something like a hardscape. It's just an area for the eye to rest on in the midst of your plant beds, right? Some of good practices for your central open shape. Let me find my notes here. So we kind of went over these. The lawn is planned and it's the designed element in the landscape. That's something that's different than anything that anybody else does, right? So you design the lawn. That's the design part of your yard. And then whenever possible, the lawn should not have anything in the middle of it, anything that's gonna make it so that the irrigation can't make it to areas in the lawn. Lawn is just lawn, and that's all it is. We're not putting chairs in the middle of it. We're not putting a random plant bed at the middle of it. We're not putting a tree in the middle of the lawn. It's its own thing. Another thing that's really important is the fact that lawns shouldn't be any less than 8 feet wide, or it will not function as a recreational space, and it'll be too difficult to water efficiently. Because if it's any smaller than 8 feet, like for example, your park strips, you see this all the time, right? People have lawn in their park strips, and when they irrigate, the entire sidewalk is being watered, and all that water is going onto the concrete and evaporating, not even being used. So it needs to be no less than 8 feet to be watered efficiently. And the fact that lawn isn't a designated path. There's other materials that you can be using for your pathways, and lawn is not one of them. And then you shouldn't do lawn on slopes, because water, when it is irrigating your lawn, right? Irrigate it on there. If it's on a slope, guess where that water is going to go? Right down to this part of the lawn, right? If we're on a slope. And so you can't really water efficiently because all that water is going down there. So maybe down here it's going to look nice and green, but maybe up here it's going to be more brown and not look as good. So then you're going to overwater to try to compensate, but then down here is getting soggy and too much water. And then up here is maybe getting enough, but on that slope. So generally you don't want to be having lawn on slopes. And if it's a good like rule of thumb is if you're on a slope and you can't like sit in a chair without falling backwards on the slope, that means the steep or the grade is too steep to put lawn on. And so you might want to have an alternative. Maybe terracing would be something that would be really good to put in place of lawn on a slope there. So we just went through all of these. All right. The next step is your gathering areas. So we can see in our 3D design here, this is the backyard. So they have their central open shape of lawn there, and then they have a patio, and then they have a private seating area. And so these can be your gathering areas. They don't necessarily have to be exactly those things, but it can just be a place for you to sit in your landscape, and having that be a designated sitting area that is not in your lawn, but is that it's off of your lawn and in an area where that's what it's going to be used for, right? And I mean, that increases the landscape function. It enables the landscape to act as an extension of your home. Is a really good example of a gathering area outside of your home, right? You're wanting to go and sit outside. So let's create areas that are for sitting outside instead of taking chairs outside and putting them in your lawn and then having to move them later and move them back and forth. We can have chairs set in an area they're not going to be getting wet. They're not going to be disturbed. You're not having to move them back and forth. And we have just this nice sitting area. Again, like they need the right servicing, or they're going to need more work, not less, right? So, I mean, this looks like a nightmare to me, at least. The fact that there are tables and chairs in your lawn and having to mow your lawn and then be like, oh, I have all these chairs and tables out here, and have to move them. And then you have to put them back after you mow that area. There's my neighbor here. They have an above ground trampoline. And when he mows his lawn, it's the funniest thing, because he's constantly like moving that trampoline all over his yard, because he has to be able to mow all around it. Or sometimes he doesn't, and then he just like mows a circle around it, and then the next week you have this grass that's like double the size. And so it increases the maintenance, and I think it's super funny to watch him have to move that thing back and forth. I don't know why he hasn't figured out an area for that yet, but that's why having like certain areas is really important in improving decreasing your maintenance in your yard, right? And then we're going to go through these like things that it does for you. So adding curb appeal, having that nice little sitting area in your house, reduces maintenance. So this yard, this is a before, and this is the after. So they had lawn they were not using. This was a project that they did all on their own. And so they created this sitting area so they could actually have an area where they would be using, and it looks like an extension of their house, right? Like they just like took their house and they put it outside, and it's usable, and it's super fun to have like people come over and to be able to be in this area instead of having grass that they're never using, right? And it looks super awesome. And now they're not having to maintain a grass area that they're not using other than mowing it, right? Again, it improves your function. So you have like your designated areas for that gathering space. So you're using your gathering space for gathering space. You're using your lawn for your lawn. And these are just some pretty good examples of a front yard example and a backyard example. And they both look really nice. I like them a lot. And you can customize them to your own interests. I mean, I think this is awesome. If a swinging chair is not for you, you can do a seated area in your backyard, but this is what they decided to do, and it's different than just having a regular seating area on a patio, right? And this is really nice. It's in the shade. It looks like a place that you could just sit and relax and read a book. I think that's awesome. Okay, so best practices for gathering areas, and I'll go through it with the little things. I think that'll be easier. So having the correct surface materials. So you don't want to have like pavers with huge gaps in between them, because like putting chairs on like in the gaps can be uncomfortable, or you're like falling back, or you have a chair that's kind of wobbling on different materials. So having the right materials is going to be really important. Smooth surfaces for sliding chairs too is something to really consider. Again, like with the pavers, you don't want to be like sliding and having it bumping around and having it being hard to transport around the area if you're moving it around your designated area. The right location for the seating type. So just making sure that your table isn't in like full sun if you're wanting to have an area to sit and relax in, unless you want to be relaxing in full sun. But for me, I kind of like to sit and see the full sun while I'm sitting in the shade, right? And then making sure that if it's on like a patio or it's in your front yard, that you have a place for people to move around it, right? And that it's not going to be awkward for them to like scoot around. All right, step 3 are our activity zones. I'm just going to check the time here. Looks like we're doing pretty good. So here's our example again. Activity zones, things like your playground or your vegetable garden. Oh, so I guess my neighbor's example would be his trampoline in this case. And you can be really creative with what you want to do. So having like this tic-tac-toe board that I don't know what's underneath it, but looks like water can permeate through when it rains, so it's not going to create like a muddy mess or anything. But that's a super fun little activity area that doesn't really have any maintenance. Whereas this is something that you see all the time. That same neighbor, they used to have their swing set in their grass, and every week I was just like, this looks like a nightmare to have to take care of and mow around and then edge around. Like most of the time they would like mow as best they could, and then they would just like let the grass go in the other areas, and I was like, okay, like that's fine, but it is kind of annoying to have to like be mowing underneath the swings and underneath the slide and stuff. So this is not the best, at least in my opinion. And it doesn't go with our Localscape principles either, right? But having this material here and having a designated area for that play area, and then you kind of see their vegetable gardens there on the right. You have now this designated area that has a nice material for kids to play on, and then you're not having to go in there and mow around the poles and mow around the swings and the slide and things, right? So again, it reduces the maintenance that's needed. And we have raised beds here. Raised beds are really easy to put drip into, so you're not having to maintain as much with the weeds. And then having raised beds can also be really nice for when you do need to pull weeds, or you're harvesting, or you're doing work on them. You're not having to bend all the way over. You can have a seating place, or if they're higher, then you can just kind of bend over a little bit, right? But it reduces that maintenance. Simplifies your irrigation, so you're not irrigating around a play area. Like this whole entire area doesn't really need to be irrigated. The plants that you see like in the mulch area, those are bulbs, and so they're ones that they don't really need irrigation. The only thing with this kind of a look is the fact that sand might get in the the mulch. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're making these areas, is just creating areas that are going to be fun and awesome, but you might want to create a better barrier between the sand and that mulch, right? And then it improves the function of your areas again, because you have your grass area, you have your play area, and you have your seating area. They're not all in the same place. And again, with this example, I would say the rock and the mulch can start to mix, so that can kind of increase your maintenance in that wise. So just kind of be really thoughtful when you're thinking about these things, that you're not going to be putting black mulch with white rock, and you might be starting to get white rock in your black mulch because the kids are running from the trampoline to the other area, right? So best practices for our activity zones: the correct surface materials. Consider exposure. So for example, like my parents' jungle gym is in full sun. We don't have any trees that give shade to that area, and the slide is metal. So as a child, we didn't really play on the slide because it was hot. And so it just wasn't really very well thought through, the fact that, like, I mean, it was a good spot for it. They have the designated area, but there's no trees around. So we never used the slide in the summer because it would burn our legs off, right? So considering the exposure with those activity areas. Making sure it's outside the lawn area, so that you're not mowing and things. My dad, he's actually created little like concrete things that he can stick poles into for our volleyball nets. So we don't have little things that are like in the lawn, but it's something that he can mow over. So that's also something you can consider. But you don't want to have like these big things in the middle of the lawn that are obstructing your irrigation and also making maintenance a lot harder for you. And then having it be the right size for the activity, right? So you don't want like a jungle gym that's packed into this area where kids are going to be going down the slide and smashing into a wall, or having like your vegetable garden kind of all smashed into one corner. Just, you're wanting to give it enough room to be able to do the things in that activity zone area. Alrighty, so step 4 are our pathways. So here's our example again with the backyard. So we have our central open shape, we have our gathering areas, and now we have pathways that are connecting all those areas together. And the pathways are not lawn. They are their own material, and they're connecting the backyard to the front yard and connecting all those little different areas. And they can look super nice. I mean, and they also increase, like, well, there's like this principle that's like, you have to have your pathways going somewhere, and you don't want to show them the end because then there's interest in your, I mean, I guess there's that natural curiosity in people that we want to follow that pathway and see where it goes. So it creates like this kind of view that you're like, I want to go on that pathway and see where it goes to, type of a thing. And we see the difference between this and this, whereas like they have a grass area. I mean, there's a lot of problems with this, but grass can't handle a constant traffic on it. It can handle a little bit, like grass is pretty good at being able to handle people walking on it. That's why we have it in parks, and it's really soft and it's really nice for sports and things, right? But constant walking back and forth on the area will actually kill it. It compacts the soil, and then the grass can't grow there. A really good example of this also on college campuses, you'll see this all the time. It's really funny. You'll see a grass area and there'll be a path straight through the grass area. It's a concept. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like a person wants to get from one place to another place like the quickest way possible. So you see it all the time on campus because campus kids are wanting to go from this class to this class as quickly as possible because it's starting in 10 minutes and they have to go completely across campus. So they're cutting corners and things. but everybody does it. And so now you have these kind of like little deer paths through the lawn areas on a college campus, and it looks really silly. Utah State, they have a couple areas like that, and they tried to reseed the areas, but then people were walking on those areas again and taking all the seed off, so then they tried to fence it off, they grow the grass again, and then it just happened again, right? So just create a pathway for that area. Don't try to redo it with grass. Make it a designated path area and have the correct materials, because then we can have a nice pathway that this dog can nicely frolic on without ruining your grass, right? Again, pathways increase that curb appeal. You're creating natural looking shortcuts for people to cut through your park strips there on the left. A place for someone to go instead of them trudging through your plants, because everybody knows that actually happens. When there's not a place for someone to go, they kind of just step around things to get through your park strip. And then it also connects spaces like we talked about. So it's connecting the backyard to the front yard, or your sidewalk in the front of your house to your front door, right? Oh, wrong way. Again, it reduces the maintenance. So you're not having to maintain grass that's been compacted, the soil, I guess the soil has been compacted and the grass has died. But you're not having to deal with the fact that that grass is dying there, because you have a pathway there now. You don't have something that's dying. It actually looks like a pathway, and you're not having to worry about maintaining it. Oh, another example about this, my parents in their yard, they have grass all around their yard. And on the south side, let's see, no, it's on the north side of their house. They have a little space that connects the front yard to the backyard, and they've had grass in there for years. And when I got old enough to start mowing the lawn, that was my least favorite part to mow, because I'd go in there and they have lilacs on the one side and raspberry bushes on the other side, and they were both overgrowing onto the lawn. And I was having to like lean my mower into the lilac bushes trying to like mow this yard. And it didn't make sense, because we weren't using that grass for it to be like a fun place to like go play in the grass. It was just a connection, but the maintenance was so annoying and so hard to do, because I'm getting scratched by lilac bushes and raspberry bushes on the other side. Whereas if it was a pathway, I wouldn't be mowing there. I could just mow my little designated turf area and then walk on the path later, right? I'm not having to try to get underneath my lilac bushes. Oh, wrong way again. Again, it improves the function. So that example for my parents' yard, if they just had a designated path area, that'd be the path. It wouldn't be grass that we're having to maintain for no reason. And also irrigating. Like the irrigation in that area is just, I mean, as a child, it was really fun because we had spray irrigation, like rotary heads that just like sprayed the whole area. So you could just like run through and get all wet, and it was super fun. But in reality, there's not really any other function to it other than us running through it when the sprinklers are on, because there's other fun areas for us to play in the yard too. But if it was a designated pathway, it would just be a lot better of an experience walking through it, rather than having to know that that's the area that's going to be the hardest to maintain in my landscape, right? So let's go through our best practices for our pathways. Using pathways to connect spaces, and also have in mind your areas that are like kind of your main walking areas, or you're going to be wanting to have be like concrete, and also your areas that you're going to be putting like your garbage can, or areas that you're going to be needing to plow. You don't want that to be gravel, because you're going to be either ripping up your gravel with your plow, or it's going to be really hard to drag your garbage pan across gravel, right? So using the correct material for those areas that you're connecting together. So that pathway with the concrete there, that's between probably their driveway and their front door. And then they have a secondary pathway that's going from their front door over to their side yard and then backyard probably. So using those pathways to connect the spaces, but also using the correct materials. Yeah, so we talked about that. Having the main pathways be the hardscape surfaces, and then other pathways being a little bit more of your looser materials. Awesome. So step 5 are your planting beds, which is crazy because most people think, oh, planting beds, that's like step 2. No, it's step 5, because your planting beds, they're going to fill in everything else that you haven't done. So you've done your central open shape, you've done your gathering areas, you've done your activity zones, you've done your pathways, and now everything else becomes planting beds. And here's our example again. You can see how they've now filled everything in with their planting beds, but they have their central open shape, they have their pathway, they have their sitting area. I don't think they have an activity zone in the front yard, which is fine, but they do have them in the back. And plant beds are awesome because they create a lot of color. They create your interest. And I mean, to be honest, like, they don't actually take that much maintenance. All of these plants will do pretty well with like 0 maintenance during the season. Both the yellow flowers are rudbeckia and the pink ones are coneflowers. Both of those, they're very long bloomers. And then in the winter, or not in the winter, the fall time, you can just cut them down to the ground and then they'll come up the next year, right? So it's pretty much like a spring, summer, fall maintenance type of deal. And it's not an everyday thing like people think. Let's see, and it's nice because they're kind of the finishing touches to your landscape, right? Because you put in all your areas and now you're going to fill it with all these beautiful plants that create your interest and your variation and your texture in your landscape. So we can see here that this is your kidney-shaped bean plant bed that is pretty typical for Utah. My parents have them. They drive me nuts. I've been trying for years to get them to not make kidney bean shape in their yard, just because they're having to irrigate all around it. There's not much that like it's doing for the yard. And it's just, I mean, it's just not the best. It's blocking the yard, and we could be adding so much more variation in things and having it be in its own space instead of having it be in the middle of the yard. Whereas like here you can see that they have their central open space there, and then they have their plant beds and a pathway in there to create an area for someone to walk and have it be such a nice way to be able to create an area that looks appealing and looks really organized and nice. And then also creates a lot of color and interest to the landscape as well. So it increases that curb appeal. Like, look at this landscape. This is actually, I love this picture because, I mean, a lot of the plants that you see in there, you see the bulbs and those are creating some color, but a lot of landscape plants that don't have flowers can actually bring variation through the color of their foliage. I mean, we see the purple foliage, we see that yellow foliage, and we see the green foliage, and then kind of that orangish foliage, and it's all creating this beautiful variation in the plant beds. And then we get to rest on that central open shape grass area, and then we see our seating area over there where you can sit and relax and enjoy this beautiful view, right? Again, it reduces maintenance, which most people think is crazy, but instead of having to mow your lawn all day, you're just irrigating those specific plants with your drip irrigation, and you're not giving water to the weeds all around. So you're not out there weeding all day long. You're not out there edging your lawn every single week. Weeding may be something that you have to do after it rains, but during the summer we don't get a ton of rainstorms. And so if you're keeping your drip irrigation on specific plants instead of having it go all over the plant bed every time you water, you're not giving those weeds one of the things that they need to live, which is water, right? Again, it simplifies your irrigation. You're running drip to specific plants instead of trying to create a spray irrigation system that's going to hit every single plant, and hopefully it's going to get to all of them. My parents, we're currently working on them getting drip in their plant beds, but they've been using spray all these years, which is fine, but there have been plants that have struggled because the water won't be able to reach everything because there's bigger plants that are blocking. Whereas drip irrigation, you're going to specific plants now, and it's really easy to be able to water that plant because you have drip going to that specific place. So our best practices for our planting beds. We don't have any lawn in the park strip. We've already talked about this a little bit, but it doesn't make sense because of irrigation. It's not being used. And there's other materials that you can put in there to create a nice looking park strip that isn't high maintenance and that can still look really good. So no lawn in a park strip. Using Utah friendly plants. So not necessarily Utah natives, but plants that do really well in Utah and that don't use as much water, maybe. There's actually a huge selection, of plants that don't use as much water as other ones. And they look really good in the landscape. And sometimes, like, some of them, there's even some that once established, they don't really need to be watered. Like, they won't need to be watered more than once a week, which some people think is crazy. But they'll look awesome and great. And so using Utah friendly plants that do really well in our climate and that don't need to use as much water. Drip irrigation in your plant beds. So no spray in your plant beds. It's all drip irrigation. And then adding 3 to 4 inches of mulch is something that's pretty smart to do. One, because it does help with the weeds. Having that 3 to 4 inches, like 3 to 4 inches is pretty significant. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so that's about 3, that's about 4. So that's a pretty good area between your soil and your air. And we have this mulch in between. It's kind of creating a little bit more of this area that weeds aren't going to love living in. So it can help with weeds. And then it also helps to cover up some of your drip tubes and things. And then only using annuals in containers. That's something that is not as used as I feel like it should be. It's something that I wish my parents would do a little bit more, because my mom loves petunias, and she puts them in her yard every year. And every year they struggle because in Manaway, we use water that comes from the canal. So we can only water when it's our turn. And annuals will usually need to be watered every single day, especially if they're in a container. But they're one of those plants that grow more in warmer, more humid climates super well. And so my mom is always really upset because we have these petunia plants that are all dying because they're not getting enough water to be able to be establishing in the soil and making these big, beautiful, bushy plants, right? A lot of them dry up and die. And every year she's like, why are all my petunias dying? And I'm like, Mom, it's because you shouldn't put them in your plant beds. So having your annuals in containers is something that's a really good practice for your plant beds, because then you can put those containers in areas around your lawn, or not your lawn, areas around your house, and having them be in the areas, but making sure that they're getting the water that they need, but then not overwatering your other plants, right? Alrighty, so we have all of our 5 steps, and now we're going to put it all together. And so this is a good example of a rectangular lot. These kind of principles can actually work. Can work for different shapes of lots. So we have a rectangular lot here. We have the corner lot. We have an irregular lot. So they're all differently shaped, but you're seeing all the different steps in them. They all have that central open shape. They all have their seating areas that are separate from their lawn, they all have activity zones that are separate. They have pathways that are connecting everything. And then they have their plant beds that are all around. And it looks awesome and all the different things. And then even this odd shaped lot, they don't even have any grass, but they have their central open shapes as gravel, right? And it looks awesome. At least I think it does. I think it looks great. Another big thing with this Localscapes is the fact that it saves over 130,000 gallons of water per year, right? That's crazy. That's crazy that we're using that much water, and the fact that just applying these principles can save that much, instead of like having to water everything being lawn, which lawn is something that actually needs a little bit more water. We're creating a landscape that you're just giving a lot of water to your smaller lawn areas, the areas that are actually going to be used as lawn, and then we're not needing to water our plant beds as much, and that saves quite a lot of water, which is what we're trying to teach as the conservation part of the Weber Basin Water District, right? Oh, come on, here we go. All right, so your next steps here. What are your next steps? So we've told you the 5 different steps, right? And there's a few different ways that you can do it. So you can do it yourself. We've had a lot of people actually do that, and that's by attending the Localscapes University, completing the design workshop class, and completing the irrigation workshop. We're going to have all of those classes available. You can hire a pro, somebody who can do it all for you. There's, through the Localscapes website, you can actually go on there and email. There's a Facebook page that you can become a part of to have people recommend who you can contact to be able to come and do your yard. And the Localscapes is awesome because they've partnered with professionals to be able to do these to implement these Localscape principles into your yard for you. And then they'll go through with you the whole plan so that you can make sure that it's checking everything off of your list, and that it's checking everything off of the Localscapes list too, right? Or you can do the hybrid approach, which is attend classes as needed, and then you can also have a professional come and do some other things, right? So here is a do-it-yourself example. This was the before, and they did everything themselves. I'm pretty sure this example, they did it step by step. So they just kind of did things one by one. They didn't do it all in the same season, but they did things little by little to help save money and then be able to create this beautiful design that is now this one. It's such a different looking landscape, and it makes even the home just look so much more inviting and different and colorful and green, and it looks great. And they have reduced maintenance, they have increased curb appeal, they have improved function, right? Like, it's awesome. This one was a professional installation, so they got together with the Localscapes and they had them recommend a professional to come and implement those principles into their landscape. And this is how it turned out. It looks really beautiful. You can see they have that central open shape. They have the plant beds around. They have seating area up on their porch. And then you can see their front door, and then there to the right, they have a specific pathway that connects to their backyard, right? It looks awesome. And this one was a hybrid approach. So this one, they had a professional come and do the irrigation, but then they did all the design work and things on their own. And again, it looks amazing, and it looks a little bit different because usually the grass goes to the front door. Sorry, I was checking the time. It looks like we're at an hour, and we just have a few slides left, so we're doing pretty good. Yeah, so this one is awesome because it has beautiful plant beds. They were able to keep that beautiful tree and make it into its own bed, so now it's not competing with the grass, right? And it looks beautiful. Here's a place to start is your park strip area. Take out the grass and create this nice looking park strip that doesn't use as much water and that has a pathway through it and has these plants that create interest throughout the season. And these plants that were used for this example are actually really low water plants. So they're not really needing to be watered like a ton past being established, right? It's awesome. And then this is a sample landscape plan. You can see all the different elements in there, right? Beautiful, easy. And it looks like it's going to be a great looking landscape. And you can come to our garden. We have a couple of examples that show the Localscape design and show you the different elements that you can be putting into your own landscape there. This is at the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. We have our own learning garden where you can walk through anytime, and it can show you different plants to use. It can show you the different Localscape things, and you can get ideas for your own yard. And so that's the end of my presentation. I am going to show a video. This kind of goes through some people that have gone through the Localscape classes and things, and that they have had beautiful landscapes that they now love. So we're going to see if this video works. Hopefully it does. I'm going to share a new screen here. Alrighty. It might be a little bit glitchy, but it should be good. Here we go.
The information that we got to make the change was by taking classes at the Conservation Garden Park. I took some classes first, and then Andy followed after I was trying to convince him to also do this. And once he took those classes, we both decided that this was the best thing for our yard and for our family, and it's been a wonderful thing to have that knowledge in helping us change our yard over.
One of the favorite things that we made a change with in our yard is the parking strip. It gives us a lot of different color and variety throughout the year, and we've added these extra pathways that the kids can walk on when they're coming up to the yard, and it connects up to this flagstone pathway. We often get a lot of compliments on, and I think it really adds to the front of our yard.
Well, we actually asked some neighbors who did something very similar to this. We needed to change our sprinkler system, so we asked for that, and they said, well, really what you need to do is take this class. First, we took the curb strip class, and we really liked that idea because we never could keep our curb strip green. And then we took the Localscapes class. We followed the instructions in the class. We ran a drip system, so the only things getting water are the plants. Well, we were told that it was going to be very hard to take care of by people around, but I have found that it's really easy. And all I do is wander around the yard for about 5 minutes a day, and if I see anything coming up, I pull it. I like the way it looks. I didn't like the way my yard looked before, and so I kind of ignored it and tried to stay away from it. If anybody walks by, people I've never even seen before, always have to comment on how nice the yard looks. We used to have like 5,000 square feet of lawn, and I think we have about 1,200 now, and it's a much prettier yard. And the day we took the class, we came home and rounded up our lawn. And that was the beginning.
I'm Nanette, and the thing I like best about my yard is I love pulling up to it and looking at how beautiful it is. It has been such a fun project to do, and it's so fun to be able to say you worked on it yourself. So last spring at the home show, I saw a display for Conservation Garden, and I noticed that they offered several free classes. And Conservation Garden pushes heavily on the mulch and the drip system and no weed fabric, and everyone thought we were crazy, including neighbors and nurseries and other landscape specialists that I had spoken to. But we took a leap and followed their advice, and I am amazed. It's been really fun to see people slow down as they drive by, and I have a small home business, and I have clients that come up to my home and they all make a fuss over it. It's been really enjoyable.
Awesome. So there are some examples of people that have gone through the Localscapes program, and their successes in their landscapes. They love their landscapes. They love how it looks. They love the fact that it's not as high maintenance as having all grass, and the way that it just brings a beauty to their home that they didn't have before, right? So there's our introduction to Localscapes class, and I'll turn it over to Dave if we had any questions that we need to discuss over with everyone else.
Okay, thank you, Hattie. No, there's been some questions along the way, and I've just answered those as they were typed in. But if anybody, anybody that's still with us, if you have some questions now at the end, please type them in, and we'll just answer them verbally for everybody. Since most of the attendees probably can't see some of the questions, a couple of the questions that came through had to do with plant lists and plant availability. This class is intended to be an introduction, so of course we didn't get into the depth of plants and plant varieties and plant choices and any of that. We will be offering those other follow-up classes. We're going to be doing a perennials class. If this class was of interest to you as just an introduction, a basic intro to cover what it is that Localscapes is about, then please sign up for the Localscape University and the design workshop and even the irrigation workshop, where we'll go into the depth of how to effectively, do this stuff. If you're interested in doing it on your own, well, we can help you through that process. Also, there is a Facebook group. It's online, primarily headed up by Jordan Valley Water, but we're all a team on this Localscape thing through the statewide effort. And so if there are resources to help you kind of step by step through this if you'd like to get in that Facebook design group, or just do these on your own. Come to the classes, participate in those classes, and we'll do the best we can to help you. That's what this is about, is providing you a resource, helping you through this. If you want to hire somebody, there are also on the Localscape website, you'll find a list of contractors that have gone through a similar type of training to be certified contractors for Localscapes. They'll know what you're talking about. They'll know what the program's about and the principles are about, and they'll be able to help you through that if you're interested in that. So a few questions coming in, and Hattie Ann, we can take turns answering these, or you can. One of them was, using mulch seems to be high maintenance. Any suggestion besides rocks? You want to answer that? Or do you want me to?
I mean, I can answer it. I have a couple of ideas. Something that works really well, besides, well, they're probably talking about kind of around your plant beds.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some things. When I worked in Colorado, a lot of what they suggested there was actually just using a soil pep, which isn't a mulch. It's kind of like it has like a little bit more soil, a little bit more organic matter, and then like little pieces of mulch. And that's something that they would just kind of like brush on the top of the soil. It's not something that they would do like a ton of mulch all at once. So it was just like something that gave it a really good finish without having to have that really thick layer of mulch. So that's something that they used, and I did never see it being like a problem with like a lot of weeds coming through, especially if you were like staying on top of the weeds, or you had the drip irrigation going to the different areas. So that's something that you could use. It gives it a really nice finish, and it also adds that organic matter to the soil as well. So that was an idea that I had.
Yeah, let me answer that as well. This will cover actually two of these questions, because another question was about our opinion about weed fabric and planter areas. So my answer on this, maybe to cover both of these, is organic mulches, meaning barks or soil pep or any of those, they're going to break down over time and add nutrients to the soil. However, if you use a weed fabric, it's going to create a barrier and an interface where the organic matter from that organic mulch isn't going to mix into the soil. It's not going to break down and add to the soil. And so in our climate, you really only have two choices. In some other climates, sometimes they'll use pine needles or nut shells. And funny enough, you could use all those things. They're just not readily available here. And so you really are using a bark type mulch product as a mulch, or any kind of aggregate material, your gravels of different shapes and sizes and rocks. And there's a lot of color options for those, but if you don't want to use rocks, you have to just maybe choose a type of bark mulch, a larger chunk material, smaller chunk material, whatever meets your needs. The larger stuff won't tend to blow away as easily. The smaller stuff can blow away. But my opinion of weed fabric is honestly, down the road, it can work initially, but down the road, you almost end up with more problems than it's worth as far as the cost putting it in and then tearing it out later. Unless there's only one exception to that, unless you're not planting in it and it's going to be under rock, then I would probably recommend maybe a fabric in those situations. If you're not cutting holes in it, you're not doing anything, you're just putting rock on top, it could maybe be effective there. So I hope that addressed those two questions. If you have other questions, put another follow-up in there and we'll answer that. Another question, maybe Hetty Ann, there's one in here about pulling up the rectangular lot slide again.
Yeah.
If you can find that, and then I'll
Yeah.
address another one while you're looking for that.
Mhm.
One said, does Localscape work for an orchard? And I think the answer is yes, it can. Depending again on how you want things to look and function. Of course, orchards are a whole different scenario. You do have trees. Naturally, some people actually in some orchards would recommend some type of an orchard grass or something in there that they can easily mow and you don't have a lot of weeds. So it's a little different principle, I'd say, in an orchard because you do have those trees evenly spaced. You know, it's a very organized, functional tree fruit production. So you could use some of the principles, not the open shape, not the gathering spaces, or you could actually have some gathering spaces where you put a few trees or excuse me, chairs or something in the shade. But you're not gonna incorporate some of the same stuff. But putting certain types of mulches, focusing on how you irrigate the orchard is certainly a way. You can irrigate orchards with drip irrigation. It's going to be a little different than your perennial flower beds and so forth, but it can be done effectively. So I think yes, the answer is yes, it can work there. And we could talk about that a little bit more because I know who asked that question, so I can talk to you one-on-one about that later. Another question here. Actually, you've got the rectangular one up, so I
Yeah,
guess
I got that one up.
Trish, you asked that question. Take a look at that while I'm answering a couple other questions.
Can she
This
see
one,
it?
there's another one here is our house is on top of a hill. Front yard has plenty of good, has a pretty good slope. Do you have any examples of this type of yard? I imagine she's talking about photos. I don't think we have photos of a deeply sloped yard.
Mm-hmm.
We're always looking for good photos that we can use as examples. Depending on that slope, you say it's a pretty good slope. I'm not sure what that grade might be. It goes back to those principles. You can do different things on a slope. Most of the time we discourage lawn on a slope just because they're harder to irrigate. Some of it depends on soil types, but it's hard to irrigate, especially if it's a southern facing slope. It tends to burn, get really hot. So that's where we recommend maybe removing the grass and incorporating other things, different perennials, different shrubs. Your activity zones are a little bit limited unless you terrace it and flatten that slope and create some retaining walls and different things like that. Depending, again, that's not always possible. So for you with the slope, maybe you could contact us and we could maybe take a look at it with some photos you send us or something like that. We could give you some recommendations. My email is drice@weberbasin.com. I should have had that maybe on my slide here. And Hattie Ann is H Fasold. You see her name there, H Fasold @weberbasin.com. I pronounced that wrong, huh? Fasold.
It's baffled. That's okay.
Sorry,
That's fine.
H Fasold @weberbasin.com. So send us an email. We could take a little bit more of a look one-on-one with that one. Next question is, what is Facebook group called? I'm not, I should know this. I think you just need, it's a Localscape.
Well, let me look it up.
Okay, while you're looking that up, I'll go to the next one. Oh, there was two of them. What's the name of the Facebook group called?
Yeah, let me look it up here.
Another one was, in a fairly steep transition area between front and backyards, is it better to have a planter area there or with a pathway, or better to terrace with steps? That goes back to the question a little earlier with the slope. It's kind of your preference, what you choose to do with that and how you want it to function and look. depending on slope, maybe it is better to have a terrace with some steps, or in your case, maybe it's just a nice gradual pathway with some planters. Personal preference really on that one. You just make a decision based on how steep it is and how you're going to use that. If you want to have steps and use those steps regularly, or if it's better to have a nice natural grade for you, I would say that's a personal choice. Let's see, there's another comment that there's artificial mulch, usually made of used tires, colored. That's true. On the mulch question, you can get artificial rubber mulches. A lot of times they are recycled tires, different things like that, different grades. So that is also an option. It won't break down, but it looks a little bit more like bark mulch than rock. So that is an option. There's some debate probably out there about how it heats up and all that different kind of stuff, but all mulches are going to serve a good purpose to shade the soil, moderate soil temperatures. Even if it's rock, sometimes you think, well, that rock's heating up. It creates a barrier between air and soil, helps keep soil moisture levels higher, helps reduce weed seed germination, and of course just the overall look. So so Trish said thanks for that rectangular lot.
I have that Facebook page, Dave.
Okay, go ahead with that.
So it's Localscapes Work Group. So I can show you.
Localscapes Work Group.
Yeah. So I don't
Okay.
know if you can see. Can you see it there, Dave?
My screen's really small, so I cannot. But if everyone that's interested in that, just type in Localscapes Work Group. If you're a user of Facebook, you'll find it. If you can't find it, again, just email us. We'll try to help you find it.
It should be. When I looked it up, it was the first. I mean, it was the first thing that's on there. Localscaped is their. It's a word that they made up themselves, so it's not something that you're going to be looking to find something, because it's. If you find, like, you'll know it when you find it.
There's another question about green city codes. Is something like xeriscape allowed? Okay, that is a great question that we didn't discuss. We discussed that a lot further in the more in-depth classes, the university and so forth. Always check with your city on what their codes allowed. Every single city is different. And if your city code does not allow certain things with xeriscaping or removal of turf in park strips, then call the city and talk to them about that. Many times they have codes that are not updated. Many of them will allow it, but it's not actually in their code currently. So please just talk to your cities. But some cities are very strict about codes and they will enforce them. And if you do something in violation of that code, they will give you a citation. So great question. Always check with your city on their codes because every city is different. So let's keep going. There's another one is here is ideas for an established island in the front yard. Has a full-grown redbud tree in it. They hate to pull it out. Have any thoughts on that, Hedian?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of depends on the placement of it. There was that one example from the presentation where they had a full-grown ginkgo. This one, yeah. So they had this whole area as grass, and they had the ginkgo in the middle of the grass area, right? So I mean, if it was an island also, or it was just like in the middle there, you can create a plant bed still with that tree in it. So it depends on the placement. Seeing a picture of it would be something that'd be really helpful to be able to know where it's at. But you can create an area that's like the plant bed around that tree, so you're not having to pull up that tree. You can still keep it, but then eliminating kind of the grass areas around and creating the plant bed area, and then having your grass area be in another spot where it's being used, right? So it kind of depends on where it's located. So maybe sending me a picture of it so that I can get a better idea of where the tree is in relationship, like, to the rest of the house or to the landscape, would be helpful.
Yeah, and I would add, we're not advocating that you remove large trees to try to create an unobstructed central open shape or anything like that. Sometimes you simply have some such situations you just got to work with. Don't go cutting down big trees just so you don't have unobstructed lawn. The trees have some value, and Again, these are principles to try to help you be efficient, help you have less maintenance, help you with some things. But of course, it's not hard and fixed. You got to do this certain way, certain time. But if you've got a blank slate, of course, it's very easy to start right from the beginning and to design this well and have a very functional, very aesthetically pleasing, low maintenance, low water yard. But certainly don't go cut down big trees. You can certainly work around those. We're almost, let's see, there's just a couple more. Oh, she said, how do I send you a picture? Oh, yep.
Well,
How
I'm
do you
gonna send
type?
her. I'll send her my email.
Perfect. And any others that want to send us an email, again, it's drice@weaverbasin.com or hfasold, sorry, I'm gonna mess that up again,
You're
at
good.
weaverbasin.com. Just to start, first initial, last name, weaverbasin.com to either one of us. And then another couple, there's just two more questions here. How do I evaluate the quality of my soil for various plants? The best way, if you're really worried about soil quality, the USU Extension Service has a soil, they offer a soils test. So they'd give you a test kit, they would send it off to the soils lab at Utah State main campus. They would do a thorough analysis of your soil and send you a report that breaks down the components of your soil, nutrients needed, recommendations for soil improvement, and if there are any problems. And then you could go from there. Short of that, you're doing your own analysis and kind of guessing. I would just recommend you do a thorough soil analysis if you're very concerned about it. And then what do you think about making your own mulch from trees in your yard? Certainly, if you have a lot of trees, you're pruning trees a lot, you've got a lot of branches, and you have a chipper or a shredder, certainly you shred all that material up, it's going to be great mulch. Again, it will fade, it'll turn gray. All of it does over time. It's not pine bark mulch that sometimes you buy that, that has that smell or looks a certain way. But as far as the functionality of the mulch and what it does, certainly any of that material that you can shred up yourself is going to do this exact same thing. And so use that material. Certainly, it's a great idea. Some of the questions just keep coming in. So,
did you see the question about suggestions for clay soils and plants that are good in this type of soil?
I did. Well, I just barely did.
Yeah.
That's a whole, I think that one, please email us on that one, because that's a whole big topic of clay
Yeah.
soils with plants good for that. Again, we'll get into a lot of depths with plants and soil types in some of these other classes. And for the sake of time, that one's going to be a little more in depth to cover. So please send us an email and we can address that specifically with you, or we're certainly going to address that in other classes.
Yeah.
But that's a great question, because certainly soils play a major role in the plants that'll do well there, how you're going to irrigate those plants and be successful. So
There's
let's
one
see.
more, Shelly. She
Yeah,
says
she's got grass that won't die, and is there any way to kill it without using Roundup? Well, yes. Well, maybe. Depends on the type
kinda.
of grass. Depends on the type of
Yeah.
grass you have. Some people have tried basically a solarization method or a smothering method. So you could take layers of cardboard out there and cover it all up and try to essentially, it's just smothering the grass. It's not getting any light. Cut the irrigation to it so you're not irrigating it at all. You're not getting any light on it, and over time it'll probably die. It's gonna be a long approach to do that. The other way that's similar to that is when it starts to warm up, use a clear plastic. You're basically creating a greenhouse effect for that. Again, no irrigation, cover it with clear plastic. And in the warmer times, the sun's gonna go through that plastic, it's gonna heat up and essentially burn the grass. You're just gonna scorch it, it's gonna dry out, burn it. And again, it'll take some time. It takes a few weeks to accomplish that in the warmer time of the year. But you may be able to kill it that way if you don't want to use any sort of herbicide. Certainly, it'll work, and it's called solarization. It'll work. It'll be fine, but it just takes some time, and you got to do it the right time of year. It's not going to work as well in the spring because it's not nearly as hot, and you may just a little extra heat and greenhouse effect on that lawn early. It's just going to maybe make it green and grow fast, of course, until it dries out, and then it'll start cooking it. So. Oh, questions keep coming in. We appreciate all these questions, and we're glad you joined us. If you're finished with questions and you're done with the class, we appreciate it, and we hope you join us again for the next classes. We'll continue to answer these few more questions that are coming in. One was here. I made a mistake of putting some thorny blackberries in a planter area. Now I can't seem to kill it. Spreads, grows back. The birds eat more than I do. How do I remove it permanently? Ann?
These kind of bushes are kind of funny because like you'd think that they'd be something that's pretty easy to maintain. Like my parents, they have wild raspberries that they had raspberries planted on one side of their fence, and there's an area where they can't seem to kill them. Mine would be to like, I mean, you could take a spade to the area and just like dig it out until like it doesn't start coming back. So something that you're digging at constantly, especially if you're noticing that new growth coming up. So continuing to dig at it, trying to get down to the roots and finding the place where it keeps coming back from. You could also like cut it off and then apply Roundup to just the plant. If you just like not necessarily spraying the area, but you can just apply the solution of Roundup that you've mixed up to that specific plant that you've cut, and then that'll kind of soak down into the plant and it should kill it. Some plants do like make it through Roundup though, so those are some of the ideas, is kind of like spot Roundup and then just continuing to pull it out until it doesn't keep coming back.
Yeah, I was just going to say that same thing. Digging, you dig it out your shovel and really dig. Of course, you may not get all the roots in, it'll keep coming, but the difficult ones, do just like Hattie Ann said, cut it off. And while just after you make a fresh cut, you can actually use a little bit heavier concentrated Roundup too. It's not as dilute, and just apply it with a little dropper or something right on that fresh cut. So you got the diameter of the stem there, just apply it right around, right on that. The cambium layers of the conductive tissue of those, they're shrubby. They're going to draw that herbicide down inside, and it'll kill them more effectively than just trying to spray foliage. You can do that with trees and shrubs the same way if you have a problematic shrub or a small trees or something. Be careful though, because the trees that sucker, if you start doing that on the suckers, you could end up killing the whole tree. But in cases like blackberries or things like that you want to get rid of all of them, that's one way to do that, because their roots are sometimes interconnected. They're sending up stems everywhere. So give that a shot and just keep fighting it. You'll get it eventually, but they're pretty hardy, pretty tough shrubs. Funny enough, even in the sense of water-wise too. Those things will grow sometimes without any water, and so you can't just cut off water to them and kill them either. So, but it's a great question. Give that a shot. Keep working on it. There's a couple people have commented. Some people said salt will kill it, but nothing will grow there again. So I'd be careful with that. Don't use soil sterilants, because sometimes you change your mind. Be careful with what you're doing with soil properties to change their chemistry permanently. You're gonna probably regret that. A lot of other comments and questions in here. Soil pep is a just shredded bark to fine state. All those organic things. I don't see any new questions. A lot of great comments, and we really appreciate those. We just appreciate you joining us. I think, Hattie Ann, if you have anything else, otherwise we're kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, no, I think I'm good on my side.
Okay. Thanks again for joining us. I'm just going to end it here. If you have follow-up questions, please email us, and we're happy to answer those. And please tune in to these others coming up. We'll look forward to hopefully seeing some of your names. We'd love to see your faces and participate that way, but please join us again for the next ones. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. See ya.
Bye-bye.